Hello everybody, great to be with you again. Brad Macbeth here with the Simple Plan Live. And today we're continuing our look at how you can build a very resilient plan, long range for your finances that includes some great opportunity for financial security, some guaranteed income without tax, and fantastic estate packaging that also is untaxed. So there's opportunities to build just fantastic security, guarantees, and income into a single plan with avoiding, or more to the point, not paying taxes you just don't have to pay. And we're not talking about taxes that you should pay, that you do have to pay. We're just talking about arranging your affairs in the normal way, using very legitimate strategies to limit the amount of taxation and put your hard-earned money in your pocket during retirement and in your children's and charities and families and friends' pockets when you pass away. Wouldn't you rather share everything you've got with the people you love rather than with the government? So let's get started. As always, want to thank the Simple Plan community for sponsoring what we're up to. I really encourage you to join their facebook.com/groups/Simple Plan community. And we're getting down to posting all sorts of stuff about this strategy in the Facebook group. We're going to be really focusing on that in these coming weeks. So when you see what this could do for you, you'll want to join that group and you'll be able to see how it can really help you to advance your financial plans and your financial security today, for the future, for the rest of your life, and generationally for your family. So today's tools, well, we're just going to jump right into it. So this is just a base schematic of what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. This is essentially what we're looking at doing is taking some of your existing taxable investments. So most Canadians are putting their investments into RSPs. Of course, tax-free savings accounts are fantastic. Tax-free savings accounts are not a taxable investment. You pay tax on the money that you earn before it goes into your tax-free savings account, but you never pay tax on it after that. With an RSP, that's just tax deferral. So what happens is when you contribute money to an RSP, you're taking your earned income and it's not being fed into the, it's not being fed through the tax machine before you do that. So you're not paying tax on that earned income. It's going straight into your investment. But when you take it out, every dime that you take out of there is going to be taxed. And that presents some very dangerous pitfalls for the RSP. Now, I'm not saying RSP is not a good strategy. It can be an excellent strategy for the right people and at the right level. But most Canadians aren't really building a plan, so they don't really know if they're contributing appropriately to their RSP or not. We're actually going to do a show on that a little later in the year. So we're looking at redeploying some of our taxable investments. So for example, we've got a taxable investment that generally inside an RSP, or if it's not in any kind of a tax deferred or sheltered environment, it could just be an open investment, that you're going to pay tax on one of two things. If it's an RSP, you're going to pay a tax on every penny that comes out of there. If it's in an open investment, you're going to pay tax, some form of tax on the growth. And it depends on the nature of that growth, whether that growth is interest income or whether it is capital gains or whether it is dividends. So what we're talking about, if you think of the conventional Canadian balanced financial plan, you might have something along the lines of 60% equities, which is stocks, often inside mutual funds, and 40% of what we would call income and debt instruments. So typically bonds. And again, those may well reside inside a mutual fund of some sort. Now, the thing with the bonds, that is there to provide stability. It doesn't fluctuate up and down as much as equities do. Also tends, in theory, is supposed to tend in the opposite direction to equities. So when equities or stocks are going down, which of course, that's a big part of what's been going on this year. We're down about 16, we were down over 16% for 2022 when I checked this morning. So stocks have been going down. But the problem is that these interest-bearing and income-earning guaranteed types of investments and bonds have really not been performing well for the last 20 years. For a variety of reasons, of course, one of the chief ones being we've been in such a low interest rate environment. So what we're saying is, look, this thing that is supposed to have provided us with a lot of stability is just dead weight. It's money that we're putting to sleep by investing it there. So what if we could find another place to invest it, and where it's going to earn, it's going to grow sheltered, but when we take it out, or when we access it in our retirement, and when it comes out when we pass away, we could avoid paying tax on it. How would that be? And what if it were to actually grow at a better rate, provide a better rate, but similar stability to what the bonds and other instruments are supposed to be providing in these balanced portfolios? So this is what we're seeing on our graphic here, is taking the little piggy bank there, the taxable investments. So we're taking a portion of that and putting it into an exempt life insurance policy. And when we say it's exempt, what is it exempt from? Well, it's exempt from taxation. Not sure if you're aware that all insurance proceeds paid out in Canada for life insurance, for example, those proceeds are not taxed. But the other thing is, there are two types of life insurance policies. There are life insurance policies that you're just really renting the coverage, and that's very appropriate for the right times and the right types of coverage needed. Typically, not exclusively, but often for families with children. So if you need income replacement, if something happens to a major breadwinner, that's called term insurance, and that insurance we rent. It's only for a period of time, and then when we no longer need the coverage, we don't have it anymore. All the money we've spent is gone. It's called a sunk cost. We've spent it, it's not coming back. And while you never collected a benefit in terms of a life insurance benefit, you had the benefit of the financial security that provided over the years you had that coverage. Then a time comes you don't need all that coverage, and so you just stop paying for that insurance. That insurance is pretty cheap. Now, there's also permanent insurance, which is exactly as it sounds. It's designed to exist for your entire life, and so among other things, it will provide a payout when you die, a guaranteed payout when you die. Again, a guaranteed tax-free payout. So we take this, and there are permanent policies that we can actually accrue cash value in. So we can deposit in there more than just the cost of insurance, the bare cost of the insurance, and increase the long-term benefit, but also enjoy the tax advantages that these plans provide. That is, there's no tax while the investment increases, and there's no tax when the whole thing pays out at the end. So there are some very interesting things we can do with this. So what we do in this case, and there's primarily two types of cash accumulating insurance plans in Canada. One is called Whole Life, the other is called Universal Life. And so we take this plan and we divert some of the money that's going into our current taxable investments, that is going to sleep, it's not really earning us anything, and we begin to accumulate it inside this life insurance policy. And that gives us opportunity of a couple of things that you can see right there on the screen. The first is we can create income in retirement out of this thing. So essentially what we can do, now we could simply withdraw the cash out and use that if we wanted to. You could do that at any time, but you're going to pay tax on that. You're taking it outside of the tax shelter to do that. But if instead we leave it inside that tax shelter, so it continues to grow at this tax-free rate, and then we just borrow the money from ourselves out of the policy, and we create a stream of income for ourselves in retirement, kind of like our own personal pension. And so we can pick and choose what timing we want to do with that, and we use this loan, this debt facility, we're going to pay interest on it, but the cost of the interest we're going to pay is significantly lower than the cost of the tax we would pay. And so we take this and we give ourselves an income through our retirement. Now, when we finally pass away at the end of our retirement, there is still an amount left in the policy. We can design how much is left in. Maybe it's only going to be 10% of the face value of the policy, or maybe it's still going to be a very significant amount. Either way, that money is going to do two things when we die. First off, that life insurance is going to pay off that entire loan that we had, that we used in retirement. And secondly, any residue is going to go to our heirs. So our children, your favorite causes and charities, family, friends, whatever you want. But again, the best part of this is all of that is going to pay out tax-free. And that's what gives this plan its dual advantage. It's growing tax sheltered, but then it's paying out tax-free. All right, so what does this look like? So here's just a list of those benefits. So by redirecting money from your taxable investments into the life insurance policy, you can pay less tax over your lifetime. And the funds within the insurance policy grow on a tax-advantaged basis. Payments above the required premium can accelerate the growth of the plan within the policy. So then you come to the time to enjoy your retirement. So let's just think about that, enjoying your retirement first off. Right? So, I work with people, they're heading to retirement. What are you going to do in retirement? Oh, well, I'm going to hang out at the country club. I'm going to play golf. I'm going to volunteer in my overseas. I'm going to go on vacations. I'm going to do this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, fantastic. And so then they retire and I come back and I see them after a time. I'm like, so what have you been doing? Well, not much. We're trying to be careful with our money just in case. And I'm like, okay, well, what about the golf? What about the vacation? What about traveling overseas for these worthy causes that are important to you? You haven't done any of that. Well, no, we're being careful with money because, well, just in case. And so then you fast forward and I come back a bunch of years later and they're getting older and it's getting difficult for them to do some of these things, and still they haven't started doing them. And then finally, they eventually pass away. And what happens with all their money? Well, they didn't spend it because they were protecting it just in case. And so they pass it on to their children. And what do their children do with it? Well, their children go and join the golf course. Their children go on vacation. Their children go and serve these worthy causes overseas. And so that's what a lot of people's retirement looks like. And it doesn't have to be that way. And by setting up these tax-sheltered and in some cases guaranteed streams of income from these sources that we can build and manage ourselves, avoiding the tax and still having the certainty of that estate we're going to pass on in retirement, so we don't need to kind of hoard that so we can pass it on. That frees us up, that frees people in retirement up to spend their money without having to worry that they need to be saving some just in case. So they can enjoy their retirement. Once the accumulated cash in the policy is large enough, they can apply for a loan and use the policy as collateral. With many of these policies, you can also just borrow the money directly out of the policy itself. You don't even have to involve the bank. You may get a better rate with the bank. And so now you're going to supplement your retirement income with those tax-free dollars. And then finally, at death, the life insurance proceeds pay off the loan with the balance, the rest of it paid to your beneficiaries. So let's just take a quick look at a specific example. So in this plan, we have a 35-year-old man and a 33-year-old woman. And they redirect some of that money. They take $300 a month to feed this plan and also to buy all the insurance they need, to rent the other insurance they need. So it's not all going into this plan. And so what we find is by the time they get to age 85, so that's approximately life expectancy for both of them. The rate of return on this money that they've been accumulating inside this plan is 4.26%. And it says after tax, but that's with no tax effectively because they're not going to pay tax on it. So let's compare that to what we can do with deposits in bonds or in these other income producing investments that are low risk. And the answer is there's just not much that compares. At least for the last 20 years, we have not been able to see those kinds of returns for the most part. So they've accumulated deposits over the long haul of they've made deposits of $212,400 over the lifetime of this plan. But the estate value is now at $386,992, which that's nice. I mean, it doesn't sound like a huge increase. But the reason it doesn't sound like such a huge increase is because they also had another $9,000 every year in retirement of tax-free income. $9,000 of tax-free income, $750 a month. Now, we're going to do a show later about the complexities and arrangements you want to be looking at when you're planning for your post-retirement income, because that's not an area that almost anybody looks at. Even people who are working with an advisor who's giving them financial plans, a lot of time they're not even looking to that. They only focus on the investing. How much am I putting in and what kind of return am I getting today? But the bigger question is, how much income tax am I going to pay on this stuff? And the real question you want to answer is, what's the after-tax spending I'm going to have access to in retirement? That's really what matters, right? The rest of it is just the means of getting to that. So we want to optimize the highest level of after-tax spending that we can get to. Okay, so you've had $9,000 a year in income for, in this case, it would be 20 years. So that's $180,000. So it's actually grown to $546,000. Plus it's paid off the interest rather than the tax of what we've accumulated inside, or what we've spent, what we've accessed through the loans. So again, the number to focus on is that 4.26% rate of return. Now, bear in mind, again, this is just a part of your investing. You're still going to have, this is the ballast that's providing the balance in your balanced portfolio. You're still going to have a pool of equities, probably through mutual funds for most of us, that are going to be growing at a better rate than that. And we're going to be putting those inside RSPs and tax-free savings accounts, and we have other plans for those. This is a portion of your money, and this is the ballast, the balance portion you're getting 4.26% on. All right. So, just to review, or to compare, you're getting a 4.26% rate of return from this investment inside your life insurance plan. A comparable alternative investment of balanced mutual fund over that same period of time is only after tax at age 85 going to return you 2.91%. So you get what it is that you need to do with that portion of your money. All right, so now let's compare the rates of return you would need in other investment vehicles to achieve the same outcome that we're getting with this accruing money inside our plan here. Well, if it were interest income, which effectively is everything inside an RSP, it would need to be 8.45% that you'd need to be getting. Well, I'm not saying you can't get that. In fact, I believe you can. However, you have to take a lot more risk to get that 8.45% than you do to get the 4.2% inside this life insurance plan. Dividend income, you need over 7.6%. even with capital gains, realized or deferred, you're going to need between almost 5 and 5.6%. And again, those are higher risk investments. So when we look at the investing that's going on inside our life insurance plan, it's not gone down 17% this year. It's continuing to tick along at a positive rate. Whereas all these others, these various forms, are taking a beating right now. Again, right now, first 6 months of this year, we're down 17% on equities. So these bottom three here, dividend income, capital gains, deferred capital gains, down 16, 17%, many of them. All right, so we can see that we're really reducing the risk that we're taking, and we're getting a great tax advantage doing it at the same time. All right, so to get what we need out of these other vehicles, how much would we have to be investing to get the same rate? Well, we're putting $212,000 plus into the life insurance. In an interest income, we'd have to have put $382,000 in there. In the dividend income, it's $360,000, and down in our capital gains, it's $285,000 and $247,000. So we have to put more money. We're putting it at greater risk into these other forms of plans than this one form here. Now again, we are going to put some money into these other vehicles because we want the higher rates of return. But we want to provide some balance so that we're not strictly at the mercy of equity markets, so that when they go down 17%, we're not panicking, we're not losing sleep at night worrying about, is it going to go down further? And chances are it is at this time. It'll come back eventually. But there's something called sequence of returns that can have a profound effect on our retirement income. Again, this is another thing we're going to look at when we look at, get down kind of into the details on retirement income. Okay, so just to review, we just redirect an amount that makes sense of what are currently taxable investments and put them into our non-taxable exempt life insurance environment. And then we access that money tax-free down the road through bank loans if we're looking to create retirement income through this method, and our estate is going to pay out to our heirs without any taxation. So let me just make one quick comment about what that means. If you have an RRSP, let's say you've got $500,000 sitting in an RRSP and you pass away. Well, if you have a spouse, that $500,000 RSP is going to pass over to your spouse. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I look at the obituaries a lot. I'm at that stage of life, just trying to keep track of who's coming and going in my community because I've been here a long time. And the interesting thing is that fairly regularly, for people that die old, that are married and have been married for a long time, quite regularly you'll see one spouse pass not long after the other. And so what does that mean? Well, let's say you pass on, your $500,000 RSP passes on to your spouse, tax-free, it's a good deal. They're still being compelled to take money out. If they had their own RSP, now they're having to take more money out every year, which is increasing their tax load. But when the second spouse passes away, which, as I say, often happens weeks or just a few months later, that money now is 100% taxed as income. And so in British Columbia and many jurisdictions in Canada, you're going to pay about 50%. We'll use 50%. It's actually higher. It's 53.53% in BC and similar numbers elsewhere. But let's just use 50%. Well, that means $250,000 of that $500,000 is going to pay out to Canada Revenue Agency. All that money you spent what, 30 years working and accumulating, saving, setting aside, limiting what you did, deferring your enjoyment of that money because you did the responsible thing so that you could live responsibly, live comfortably in retirement. But now you're giving up half that money to the government. How do you feel about that? Well, if it instead were inside this insurance plan, it's going to pay out directly. It's not going to go through probate. It's not going to get taxed by the provincial governments with their probate taxes, which generally run 1 to 3% depending where you are. And it's not going to get taxed by CRA. And it's not going to take 6 months or a year to go through the courts and the probate process and confounding your executor as they deal with all that bureaucracy. That money instead is going to get paid out to the people you designated as your beneficiaries in a check within a couple of weeks. And no tax, absolutely zero tax taken off. So that's why this type of a plan has some great advantages for people that provides some security, some tax optimization and tax avoidance, as well as there's some guaranteed growth. We looked at that last week inside these plans, in addition to relatively low risk growth inside the plans as well. In fact, just today, 2 of the major insurance companies in Canada, well, one yesterday, one today, came out and said that they're increasing their dividend rate. One's increasing it and the other is staying level with what it's been. And these companies have been providing these dividends for year over year over year for decades and decades and decades. They have very, very long track records. One of the things we're normally looking for when we're looking at rates of return. And they do everything that they can. They're experts at managing these pools of money. One of the companies I was talking to today, the pool of money they're managing is $500 billion. $500 billion. That's a big sum. And so they are, though that company is raising their dividend rate slightly. The other company is keeping theirs level, which is higher than the other companies, and it has been there for a number of years. Now, this is, when I say dividend, this isn't the amount they're paying out to the policyholders. This is the amount that's used to calculate internally as a factor the rate of return that they'll be paying inside their pool of money. So as I noted, the internal rate of return on this money at age 85 for these folks was around 4.26%. Okay, so bit by bit, I hope that you're starting to see what the real value is in this hybrid planning that we're talking about, that we've been talking about for a few weeks. We're going to keep talking about various components of it going forward. If you've missed some, you can go back on YouTube on our channel and look at all the different plans or different episodes we've done there that go over parts of this plan. But what you can really do, if you want to know, if you'd like to find out if this kind of a plan might be helpful for you, just book a time. Book a time for 15 minutes to meet with me. I'm happy to sit down and we'll just have a chat. We can figure out whether this fits where you're at, or maybe it fits where you're at in the future, or maybe it doesn't fit. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan. It's not for everybody. It's not for all temperaments, but it is a very powerful plan. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in Canada that are following this kind of a plan. And so if you would like to book a time to talk about that, just go to go.getthesimpleplan.com/calendar-new. I'll put that in the comments. And yeah, go book a time. I'm happy to sit down. There's no obligation. It's simply to figure out whether this is for you or not. We'll help you decide. And if it looks like it might be, then we'll get down to some details about how it might specifically benefit your family. All of these plans are uniquely customized for every individual family. So that's all we have for today. And I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank our sponsor, the Simple Plan community. Come on and join us there. We talk about this kind of stuff there as well. And it's just great to have real life examples to talk about and people to gather together with, to work every way we can to make the most of our money, take care of our families, and serve our communities. So if you want to join the Simple Plan community, it's free. Go to go.getthesimpleplan.com. Or sorry, go to facebook.com/groups/Simple Plan community. And that's in the comments there as well. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope we'll get a chance to meet together to look into this, discuss it further. And yeah, even, just one last note, by the way, even if you think, well, I'd like to do it, but I don't qualify for insurance, if you already have an existing life insurance policy, we can build this kind of a plan. We may be able to build this kind of a plan around your existing life insurance policy. So that's it for today. Thanks very much for joining me. We'll see you again next week on the Simple Plan Live.